Veteran and his dog explored the forest until they discovered a hidden tower full of secrets. Prepare yourself for a story that will challenge everything you believe about hidden history and the forests that surround us. This is the remarkable tale of a veteran and his loyal dog who stumbled upon a tower in the Pacific Northwest wilderness that shouldn't exist, holding secrets that powerful people killed to protect. What they found inside that tower revealed a conspiracy stretching back to World War II and forward into our very future. Before we unveil this incredible discovery that changes everything we know about America's hidden infrastructure, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you need to hear what happens when a dog's instincts lead to the discovery of a lifetime. The morning mist hung thick between the Douglas firs as Ryan Foster made his way along the unmarked trail, his boots finding purchase on the damp earth with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent years navigating hostile terrain. His companion, a black Belgian Malinois named Shadow, moved ahead with similar precision, the dog's dark coat making him nearly invisible in the pre-dawn gloom of the Cascade Mountains. They were 40 miles east of Seattle, deep in territory that most hikers never saw, where the trails on maps became suggestions and the forest revealed its older, wilder face. Ryan had been coming to these woods for 2 years now, ever since his medical discharge from the Rangers following his 4th deployment to Afghanistan. The shrapnel from an IED had torn through his left shoulder and damaged his spine, leaving him with chronic pain and a tremor in his left hand that ended his military career at 32. Shadow had been assigned to him 18 months ago, trained not just as a service dog, but specifically for veterans with Ryan's combination of physical and psychological injuries. The dog could detect the onset of panic attacks, provide stability when Ryan's balance wavered, retrieve dropped items, and create space in crowds. But more than that, Shadow seemed to understand the wilderness therapy that Ryan needed, the way being in the forest calmed the hypervigilance that had kept him alive overseas, but was slowly killing him at home. This morning's hike had begun like hundreds of others. Ryan couldn't sleep. The dreams had been particularly vivid, full of smoke and screaming and the faces of men he'd failed to save, so he'd loaded Shadow into his truck at 3 a.m. and driven to their favorite trailhead, or what had been a trailhead 20 years ago, before budget cuts had closed this section of the national forest to official public access. The signs were still there, faded and tilted, warning about unstable terrain and lack of maintenance, but Ryan preferred it this way. No crowds, no cell service, no one to perform normalcy for. They'd been hiking for 2 hours when Shadow's behavior changed. The dog stopped abruptly on the trail, his ears forward, body rigid with the kind of attention that in Afghanistan had meant danger. Ryan's hand moved instinctively to his hip, where his sidearm would have been, finding only the bear spray he carried now. He scanned the forest, looking for what had caught Shadow's attention. Bear, possibly, or a cougar, though Shadow's training usually had him indicating predators differently. Then Ryan saw it too, a structure rising through the trees about 100 yards off the trail, so covered in moss and overgrowth that it looked almost organic, like the forest had grown it rather than humans building it. It was a tower, stone and concrete from what he could see, maybe 60 feet tall, with narrow windows that had long since lost their glass. The architecture was wrong for a Forest Service fire tower, too elaborate for a radio relay station. It looked older, more substantial, built to last centuries rather than decades. Shadow was already moving toward it, not with the caution of approaching danger, but with the purposefulness Ryan recognized from the dog's detection training. He was tracking something, following a scent or signal that pulled him forward with unusual intensity. The tower sat in a small clearing, though clearing wasn't quite right. The trees had been cut back once but were returning, their branches reaching toward the structure like grasping fingers. The door, heavy steel painted to look like wood, hung partially open. The lock had been cut recently from the look of the bright metal exposed by the bolt cutters. Ryan should have turned back. Every instinct from his military training said this was wrong, dangerous, a situation to report rather than investigate. But Shadow had already entered, and Ryan couldn't leave his dog. He followed, pulling out his tactical flashlight, the powerful beam cutting through the darkness inside. The ground floor was a single room, circular, with a metal staircase spiraling up along the wall, but it wasn't empty. Equipment lined the walls, not abandoned but maintained, dust-free, with LED lights blinking on various panels. The technology was a mix of eras, Vacuum tubes alongside digital displays, manual switches next to touchscreens, cables that looked like they belonged in a 1950s telephone exchange running into a server rack that couldn't be more than a year old. Shadow was at the stairs, whining, clearly wanting to go up. Ryan followed, each step echoing metallically despite his efforts to move quietly. The second floor was files, thousands of them, in filing cabinets that ringed the room. Ryan pulled one open at random. The documents inside were dated 1952, stamped with classification markings he recognized and others he didn't, project names that meant nothing to him. Tree line, watchtower, deep forest. Shadow kept climbing, so Ryan did too. The third floor made him stop and stare. Maps covered every surface, not just of Washington state but of the entire Pacific Northwest, from Northern California to British Columbia. Red pins marked locations, connected by different colored strings like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. But these maps were official, military, some bearing the seal of the Army Corps of Engineers, others from agencies Ryan didn't recognize. Each pin had a number. Ryan found a ledger on a desk and matched the numbers to entries. Each one was another tower, another structure, hidden in forests across the region. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all connected by underground cables, all part of something called the Continental Shield Network. Shadow had continued up, and Ryan heard him bark. His alert bark, the one that meant he'd found what he was looking for. Ryan climbed faster, emerging onto the fourth floor to find Shadow sitting in front of a wall of monitors. Most were dark, but 3 were active, showing grainy black and white footage. Ryan recognized the style. Trail cameras, the kind hunters used, but these were showing other towers, structures identical to the one he was in. Motion on one screen caught his eye. A figure walking past one of the other towers, then another figure, then dozens, all moving in the same direction, all carrying equipment, all dressed in unmarked tactical gear. A sound from below made Ryan freeze, the front door closing properly this time. Footsteps, multiple sets trying to be quiet, but not quiet enough for someone trained to detect ambushes. Ryan looked for another exit and found it, a ladder leading to a roof hatch. He climbed quickly, Shadow following with the agility that made Malinois perfect military dogs. The roof was flat, with a low parapet. Ryan stayed low, peering over the edge. 3 vehicles had arrived, black SUVs with government plates but no agency markings. Men were emerging, 8 of them, armed but not military. Private contractors, from the look of their mixed gear and lack of uniform precision. Ryan pulled out his phone, hoping for enough signal to call for help, but there was nothing. Of course not. They were too deep in the forest. He was alone except for Shadow, outnumbered 8-1, with only bear spray and a knife for weapons. But he'd been outnumbered before. And this time he had something he hadn't had in Afghanistan, home field advantage and a dog trained for more than just service work. He could hear them entering the tower below, voices carrying up through the structure. They were speaking English, but also something else, Russian, no, Romanian. Ryan recognized it from joint operations in Eastern Europe. "The monitoring station's been compromised," one voice said in accented English. "Check all floors. Someone's been here." They'd be on him in minutes. Ryan made a decision that his therapist would definitely not approve of. He gave Shadow a series of hand signals, commands from their military training that he'd never thought he'd use again. The dog's entire demeanor changed, from service animal to weapon, his muscles tensing with readiness. Ryan found what he was looking for, a cable running from the tower to the next tree, probably for power or data. It was thick enough to hold weight. He'd done worse in ranger school. "Search and return," he whispered to Shadow in Dutch, a language they'd trained in that these contractors unlikely knew. The dog disappeared down the hatch, silent as smoke. Ryan heard the commotion start 2 floors down. Shadow creating chaos, knocking things over, staying mobile, impossible to catch. While they were distracted, Ryan rigged a rope from his pack to the cable and started his descent, hand over hand, his damaged shoulder screaming but holding. He'd made it to the tree when he heard Shadow yelp. They'd hit him with something, taser maybe. Ryan's vision went red. You didn't hurt his dog. Not Shadow, who'd kept him alive for 18 months, who'd pulled him back from the edge more times than he could count. Ryan dropped from the tree and circled back to the tower. The men had made a mistake. They'd left only one guard at the vehicles while the others searched. Ryan had been trained by the best in silent elimination. The guard never saw him coming. The man's radio and weapon gave Ryan options. He listened to the chatter. They had Shadow on the third floor, were holding him while they completed their search. They thought whoever had been there was gone. Ryan entered the tower like he'd entered dozens of buildings in Fallujah and Kandahar, swift, silent, violent. The first man never knew what hit him. The second managed a partial shout before Ryan's knife found his throat. By the time the others realized they were under attack, Ryan had recovered Shadow and barricaded them in the equipment room on the ground floor. Shadow was groggy but moving, the taser's effects wearing off. Ryan checked him quickly. No serious injuries, just pissed off, which made 2 of them. The remaining 5 contractors had regrouped, were calling for backup. Ryan heard them mention something about Protocol 7 and sterilization procedures. They were going to destroy the tower, eliminate all evidence, including him and Shadow. But Ryan had noticed something they hadn't. The equipment in this room wasn't just monitoring stations. It was a communication hub, and it was still active. He started flipping switches, turning dials, following cable connections until he found what he was looking for, a hard line to somewhere else, somewhere outside the forest. The first connection was to another tower, abandoned from the chatter. The second was to what sounded like a corporate office. But the third, "Hello, who is this? This is a restricted channel." The voice was military, American, with the clipped tones of someone used to giving orders. "This is Sergeant First Class Ryan Foster, 75th Ranger Regiment, retired. I'm at a tower in the Cascades. Coordinates—" Ryan rattled off their position from the GPS unit on the wall. "Under attack by unknown hostiles. Request immediate assistance." There was a pause. "Sergeant Foster, that location is— How did you find it?" "My dog found it, sir. There are at least 5 hostiles, more coming. They mentioned sterilization procedures." Jesus Christ. "Okay, Foster, listen carefully. That tower is part of a classified network. The men attacking you are not authorized to be there. Hold your position. Help is 20 minutes out." "Roger that." But 20 minutes was a long time in combat. The contractors had explosives. Ryan could hear them placing charges. They were going to blow the tower whether he was in it or not. Ryan found what he needed in a storage locker. Flares, emergency supplies from when this place had been officially manned. He had Shadow stay low while he created a distraction, firing flares out the narrow windows, creating smoke and confusion. In the chaos, he and Shadow slipped out, but not to run. Ryan had learned in Afghanistan that sometimes the best defense was an unexpected offense. He hunted them through the forest, using skills he'd thought he'd never need again. Shadow, recovered from the taser, helped, his black coat invisible in the shadows between trees. One by one, Ryan took them down, non-lethally when possible, but these men had hurt his dog, and mercy was negotiable. By the time the helicopters arrived, 2 Black Hawks with no markings, Ryan had 4 contractors zip-tied with their own restraints, and the 5th needing medical attention. The charges had been disarmed, the tower saved. The man who stepped out of the lead helicopter was everything Ryan expected from his voice. Tall, grey-haired, bearing the kind of authority that came from decades of command. His uniform bore stars but no name tape. "Sergeant Foster," he said, extending a hand. "General Morrison, Defense Intelligence Agency. You've stumbled onto something that doesn't officially exist." "The Continental Shield Network," Ryan said. "I saw the maps." Morrison's eyebrows rose. "You saw quite a bit. Walk with me." They entered the tower together, Shadow staying close to Ryan's side. Morrison surveyed the equipment room with a practiced eye. "This network was built during the Cold War," he explained. "Towers like this one, all connected, all monitoring. Officially, they were watching for Soviet aircraft, tracking weather patterns, normal defense stuff. Unofficially," he paused. "What do you know about Operation Paperclip?" "Nazi scientists brought to America after World War II," Ryan answered. "Among others. Some of those scientists were working on projects that couldn't be conducted near populated areas, projects that required monitoring, containment. These towers were built to watch those sites to ensure nothing escaped." "Escaped?" Morrison led him to the 3rd floor to the maps. "Each pin is a site. Some are abandoned now, supposedly. Others are still active. The network was officially shut down in 1991, but certain elements wanted it maintained. Privately, quietly. The contractors? Corporate interests. Some of what was developed at these sites has commercial applications. Biotech, energy, communications technology decades ahead of what's public. They've been looting these sites for years. reverse engineering what they find. Morrison pointed to a cluster of pins in Oregon. 3 months ago, a team like the one you just stopped hit a site there. What they released, well, let's just say the wildfires that burned through that area weren't entirely natural. Ryan felt the implications hit him. How many sites are compromised? We don't know. The network was compartmentalized. No one person knew all the locations, but someone's been putting it together, finding the towers, accessing the monitoring stations to locate the sites. Who? That's what we're trying to find out. These contractors were Romanian, but they're just mercenaries. Someone's paying them, someone with knowledge of the original project. A computer in the corner beeped. Morrison went to it, typing rapidly. His face paled. They triggered something before you stopped them. A data dump. Everything in this tower's been transmitted somewhere. Where? Morrison pulled up a map on one of the monitors. A location in Seattle blinked red. Nexus Dynamics. A tech company that's been buying up forest land for renewable energy projects. But if they have this data, they'll know where all the sites are. Ryan finished. Morrison turned to him. Sergeant Foster, I know you're retired, medically discharged, but right now you and your dog are the only ones who've successfully stopped one of these raids. I need your help. Ryan looked at Shadow, who was watching him with those intelligent eyes that had seen him through so much. The dog's tail wagged once, as if in agreement. What did you have in mind? Ryan asked. Over the next hours, Morrison explained the full scope. The Continental Shield Network wasn't just monitoring sites, it was containing them. Each location held something different. Some were weapons projects that had gone wrong. Others were energy experiments that had succeeded too well. A few were biological research stations where things had been created that shouldn't exist. In 1954, a scientist named Dr. Heinrich Voss was working at Site 17 in Northern California, Morrison said, showing Ryan a file. He was developing what he called living metal, a substance that could self-repair, adapt, learn. The official report says the project was terminated after an accident killed the research team. But the site's still hot, still active. The tower monitoring it shows movement, changes, growth. Something's still alive in there. Has been for 70 years. Ryan studied the files, his mind working through the tactical implications. These corporations, if they access sites like that, best case scenario, they cause another Chernobyl. Worst case, they release something that makes COVID look like a cold. So we stop them. We need to. But officially I can't act. These sites don't exist. This network was never built. You, however, are a private citizen who stumbled onto corporate espionage. Ryan understood. Plausible deniability. Black ops without the official sanction. I'll need resources, he said. You'll have them. And a team if you want one. Ryan thought about it. I work better alone. With Shadow. Morrison smiled. Figured you'd say that. But I've got someone you should meet. The someone turned out to be Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a woman in her 40s with the kind of intense focus Ryan recognized from intelligence analysts. She was in the tower's second floor, speed reading through files. Dr. Chen worked on the original network, Morrison explained. She's the one who's been tracking the breaches. Chen looked up, studying Ryan with sharp eyes. You're the one who stopped them, alone. I had Shadow. She smiled at that. I've been trying to get someone to listen for 3 years. These sites, they're not just dangerous, they're revolutionary. The technology in them could solve energy crisis, cure diseases, transform transportation, but only if accessed correctly, safely. And Nexus Dynamics doesn't care about safely, Ryan guessed. Nexus Dynamics is run by Viktor Kozlov, grandson of one of the original paperclip scientists. He believes this technology is his birthright, stolen by the American government. He's been systematically locating and raiding sites for a decade. Chen showed them a tablet with corporate records. He's smart. Each raid looks like something else, a wildfire, a chemical spill, an industrial accident. He takes what he wants and destroys the rest. How many sites has he hit? Ryan asked. 12 that we know of, but there are 47 sites total. If he gets the data from this tower, he'll know where all of them are. Shadow suddenly alert, his nose pointing toward the stairs. Ryan heard it too. Vehicles approaching. Morrison checked his phone. That's not my people. They looked out the window. A convoy of vehicles was approaching, more than before. Nexus Dynamics had sent reinforcements. How did they find us so fast? Chen asked. Ryan realized with a sinking feeling. The data dump, it went both ways. They know we're here. Morrison was already on his radio calling for backup, but it would take time. The convoy would be here in minutes. There's another way, Chen said suddenly. The network isn't just monitoring, it's connected. Each tower can trigger defenses at its assigned sites. Defenses, automated systems, lockdowns, containment protocols. If Kozlov's people are at multiple sites, we can trap them, Ryan finished. Chen's fingers flew over the keyboard. I need 5 minutes. They didn't have 5 minutes. The vehicles were pulling up, men deploying. These ones better equipped than the first team. Ryan counted at least 20. I'll buy you time, Ryan said. Foster, that's suicide, Morrison protested. No, it's Rangers. We own the night, and in a forest, it's always night. Ryan and Shadow slipped out through a maintenance hatch Chen showed them, emerging into the forest as the Nexus team surrounded the tower. Ryan had taken weapons from the fallen contractors. Not much, but enough. What followed was a deadly game of cat and mouse through the trees. Ryan used every trick he'd learned in years of combat, with Shadow as his perfect partner. They'd separate, attack from different angles, disappear before the enemy could respond. The forest itself became their weapon. Deadfalls became traps, streams covered their movement. The dense canopy hid their approach. But there were too many, and they were learning his patterns. Ryan and Shadow were being pushed back toward the tower when Chen's voice crackled over a radio he'd taken. Now, get inside now. Ryan and Shadow sprinted for the tower as something extraordinary happened. Every piece of electronic equipment the Nexus team carried died simultaneously. Radios, night vision, vehicles, everything electronic just stopped. Chen had triggered something in the network, an EMP pulse that had been built into the tower's defenses. In the confusion, Ryan and Shadow made it inside. Chen was smiling grimly at her screen. I've locked down 7 sites where Nexus teams were actively working. They're trapped inside containment protocols that won't release for 72 hours. Long enough to get real teams there, Morrison said with satisfaction. But their celebration was short-lived. The tower shook as explosives detonated outside. The Nexus team, deprived of their technology, had gone primitive. They were going to bring the tower down with brute force. We need to leave, Morrison ordered. Wait, Chen said. There's something else. I found it in the files. Site 1, the original. It's here in Washington, deep in the Olympic National Forest. It's where they kept the master controls for the entire network. And according to these readings, it's been active. Someone's been there using it recently. Another explosion closer. The tower's structure groaned. We go to Site 1, Ryan decided. If someone's using it, they're either part of this or another player we don't know about. Morrison nodded. My helicopters are 5 minutes out. We'll extract under fire if needed. Those 5 minutes were the longest of Ryan's life. The Nexus team had brought up heavy weapons, were systematically destroying the tower's supports. Chen worked frantically, downloading everything she could to portable drives. Shadow stayed calm despite the chaos, his training keeping him focused. The helicopters arrived with their own fireworks, door gunners laying down suppressing fire that sent the Nexus team scrambling for cover. Ryan, Shadow, Chen, and Morrison made it aboard just as the tower began its final collapse. As they flew over the forest, Ryan looked back at the destroyed tower. One node of the network gone, but dozens remained. And somewhere out there, at Site 1, answers waited. What do you think we'll find? Chen asked. Ryan didn't answer immediately. He was thinking about the files he'd seen, the projects that had been hidden for decades. Weapons, yes, but also wonders. Technology that could transform the world. Hidden because humans hadn't been ready for it. I think, he said finally, we'll find out why this was all kept secret, and whether it should stay that way. The helicopter banked toward the Olympic Peninsula, toward mysteries that had been buried since before Ryan was born. Shadow pressed against his leg, a comforting presence. Whatever they found, they'd face it together. The Olympic National Forest was a different world from the Cascades. Here, the trees were giants, old-growth timber that had never seen a chainsaw. The canopy was so thick that noon looked like twilight at ground level. Chen guided them using coordinates from the tower's files, leading them deep into areas that weren't on any civilian maps. There, she said finally, pointing at her tablet. 2 clicks northeast. They'd transferred to a smaller helicopter that could land in tighter spaces. Just Morrison, Chen, Ryan, Shadow, and a small security team. The landing zone was a natural clearing that looked natural until you noticed the patterns. Trees growing in perfect circles, as if something underneath had affected their growth. The entrance to Site 1 wasn't hidden like the tower. It was a concrete structure built into a hillside, massive blast doors that belonged on a nuclear bunker. But the doors were open, had been for years, from the look of the vegetation growing around them. "Someone's definitely been here," Morrison observed, pointing to tire tracks, recent ones. They entered carefully, weapons ready. The corridor beyond the doors was lit by modern LED strips that had been retrofitted over older fluorescent fixtures. Someone had been maintaining this place, updating it. The first chamber they entered took Ryan's breath away. It was vast, carved from living rock, filled with technology that spanned decades. Computer banks from the 1960s sat next to quantum processors that shouldn't exist yet. Maps covered one wall, not just of the Pacific Northwest, but of the entire world, marked with thousands of pins. "My God," Chen breathed. "The network is global." A voice spoke from speakers they couldn't see, elderly but strong. "It took you long enough to find this." An old man emerged from a side passage, moving slowly but steadily. He was in his 90s at least, wearing a simple sweater and slacks, looking like someone's grandfather rather than the guardian of impossible secrets. "Dr. Voss," Chen gasped. "You're supposed to be dead." "Heinrich Voss died in 1954, the man agreed. "I'm Henry Ross, have been since then. I've been maintaining the network, keeping the sites contained, waiting for someone to finally come looking with the right intentions." "You've been here alone?" Morrison asked, his weapon lowered but ready. "Not alone. I've had assistance over the years, people who stumbled onto the truth and chose to help rather than exploit. But I'm the last one who remembers why we built all this." Ross led them deeper into the facility, to a control room that looked like NASA mission control crossed with a mystic's sanctuary. Screens showed feeds from towers and sites across the globe. "Operation Paperclip wasn't just about German scientists," Ross explained. "We found things in Germany, in Japan, in the Soviet Union after the war, things that weren't entirely terrestrial. Crashed vehicles, technology, sometimes bodies. The sites were built to study them, to reverse engineer what we could, to contain what we couldn't." "Aliens?" Ryan asked bluntly. "Perhaps. Or time travelers, or dimensional visitors. We never knew for certain. But the technology was real, decades or centuries ahead of us. Some of it we learned to use. Your smartphone has components that came from Site 12. Some of it we had to bury because we weren't ready." Ross showed them a sealed vault. "In there is a power source the size of a baseball that could run New York City for 1,000 years. Next to it is a weapon that could turn the entire Pacific Ocean to steam. Above us is a medical device that can cure any disease, but would destroy our economy if released without preparation. And Kozlov wants all of it," Morrison said. "Kozlov is a fool who thinks he understands his grandfather's work. But there are others, smarter, more dangerous. Governments, corporations, groups that don't have names. They've been circling for years, getting closer." An alarm sounded. Ross checked his monitors, his face paling. "They're here. Kozlov himself with a small army. They must have tracked you." On the screens, vehicles and helicopters converged on Site 1. Dozens of armed mercenaries, heavy equipment, even a tank. "We're trapped," Morrison said, already on his radio, calling for reinforcement that wouldn't arrive in time. "No," Ross said. "We're exactly where we need to be. This site isn't just a monitoring station, it's the kill switch for the entire network." "Kill switch?" "If activated, it will destroy every site simultaneously. Vaporize the technology, seal the locations, end the threat forever. But also destroy miracles that could save millions," Chen protested. "Yes, that's the choice. That's always been the choice. Are humans ready for this power?" Another alarm. Some of Kozlov's men had found an alternate entrance, were already inside the facility. "We need to decide now," Ross said, his hand hovering over a panel with a single red button protected by a glass cover. Ryan looked at Shadow, who was watching him with those knowing eyes. The dog had led him here to this moment, this choice. Not just the tactical decision of the moment, but the moral one that would affect millions. "There's another option," Ryan said suddenly. "Chen, you said the network is connected, can trigger defenses at all sites. Can it do more?" Chen's fingers flew over a keyboard. "Theoretically, yes. We could activate everything at once. Every containment, every lockdown, every defensive system. Sealing everyone out? For how long?" Morrison asked. "I could set it for 50 years? 100? Long enough for humanity to mature, to be ready? Gunfire echoed through the facility. Kozlov's men had engaged Morrison's security team. Or, Ryan said, we make it conditional. Everyone looked at him. The sites reveal themselves slowly, based on triggers. When humanity solves climate change, one set opens. When we end war, another. Make the technology a reward for evolution, not a gift to the undeserving. Ross smiled. You're thinking like the original designers. They built that capacity in, hoping someone would be wise enough to use it. Can you do it? Morrison asked Chen. Give me 10 minutes. You have 5. What followed was the longest 5 minutes of Ryan's life. Morrison's security team fell back step by step, trading space for time. Ryan and Shadow took position at a choke point, holding off probes while Chen worked frantically, and Ross provided guidance from decades of experience. Kozlov himself appeared, standing behind his mercenaries. He was younger than Ryan expected, maybe 40, with the kind of cold intelligence that made him more dangerous than any thug. "Dr. Ross," he called out. "Or should I say Dr. Voss? My grandfather spoke of you, said you were brilliant but cowardly, hiding miracles from humanity. Your grandfather was a Nazi who thought humanity existed to serve the superior few," Ross replied. "I've spent 70 years making sure his poison didn't spread. Progress requires sacrifice. The technology in these sites could transform our species." "Into what? Your slaves? Your weapons?" The firefight intensified. Morrison's team was down to 3, including Ryan. Shadow had been sent to protect Chen, the dog understanding that she was the priority. "Done!" Chen shouted. "Initiating Protocol 77 Alpha." Every screen in the facility lit up simultaneously. Around the world, at every site, every tower, systems that had slept for decades came online. Not to destroy, but to protect, to preserve, to wait. Kozlov realized what was happening. "Stop them!" he screamed. His men surged forward, but it was too late. Chen hit the final key. The change was immediate and absolute. Every piece of advanced technology in the facility simply stopped working. Not destroyed, but dormant, waiting. The lights went out, replaced by emergency chemical glows. Weapons became clubs, electronic locks became manual barriers. In the dim light, Ryan heard Kozlov screaming in frustration, 70 years of his family's planning undone in an instant. But there was something else. A humming growing louder. Ryan recognized it from Chen's earlier EMP pulse, but stronger, building to something more. "Everyone down!" Ross shouted. The pulse, when it came, was visible, a sphere of blue light expanding from Site 1, passing through everything, everyone. Ryan felt it move through him like warm water, scanning, evaluating, judging. When it passed, Kozlov and his men were unconscious, not dead but down, their bodies overwhelmed by whatever the pulse had done. "Neural pacification," Ross explained. "Anyone who came with hostile intent gets a 3-day nap. Old defensive system, never thought I'd see it used." Morrison's reinforcements arrived 30 minutes later, finding a scene they couldn't quite process. Dozens of unconscious mercenaries, a facility full of dormant wonders, and 4 people and a dog who'd changed the course of human history. The cleanup took weeks. Kozlov and his organization were disbanded, its members prosecuted for various crimes that could be proven without revealing the sites. The towers were officially decommissioned, their technology removed or destroyed. Site 1 was sealed, its entrance welded shut and buried under a landslide that would take serious effort to remove. But the real work was just beginning. Chen's program was running, monitoring humanity's progress, waiting for milestones that would unlock the site's treasures. The first had already been set when carbon dioxide levels dropped below 350 parts per million. A site in Greenland would reveal technology for clean, unlimited energy. Ryan found himself with a new job, officially a consultant for the Department of Interior, unofficially the watchman for sites across the Pacific Northwest. He and Shadow spent their days hiking the forests, checking on sealed locations, ensuring no one tried to break the locks before humanity was ready. Dr. Ross, finally free of his 70-year vigil, retired to a cabin not far from where Ryan lived. They met weekly, the old man teaching Ryan about the sites, their history, their promise. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Ryan asked one evening, watching the sunset through the trees. "We gave humanity a chance to earn its miracles rather than steal them," Ross replied. "That's all anyone can do." Shadow, lying between them, wagged his tail in agreement. 6 months later, Ryan and Shadow were checking on a site in Northern California when his satellite phone rang. It was Chen, excited. "Ryan, something's happening. The sites, they're responding to something." "To what?" "I don't know, but it started an hour ago. Low-level activation at multiple locations, not opening, just awakening." Ryan looked at Shadow, who was already alert, facing north. "We'll check the nearest site," Ryan said. They drove through the night, arriving at Site 17, the one Ross had mentioned with the living metal. The entrance was still sealed, but something had changed. The metal door, which had been cold and dead for decades, was warm to the touch. And there was a sound barely audible, like breathing. Shadow approached the door, sniffed it, then did something he'd never done before. He howled, long and low, a sound that seemed to echo from inside the site, and something howled back. Ryan called Chen immediately. "The sites aren't just technological repositories, there's something alive in them." "Alive? That's impossible. The sites were sealed in the 1950s. "Chen, I'm telling you, something in Site 17 just responded to Shadow." There was a long pause. "I'm looking at the readings now, Ryan. Every site with biological components is showing similar activation. Whatever's in them has been dormant, but it's waking up. Why now? I don't know. But Ross might." They found Ross at his cabin, not surprised but concerned. "I was afraid of this," he said. "Some of the experiments weren't just about technology. They were about evolution, about creating life that could survive anything, adapt to anything. We thought we'd terminated those projects, but life finds a way." "Are they dangerous?" Morrison asked, having joined them via secure video link. "Not necessarily. They were designed to be beneficial, organisms that could clean pollution, heal injuries, terraform dead worlds. But they were also designed to be intelligent, to make their own decisions. And they've been thinking for 70 years, Ryan said. Apparently. Over the following days, the situation evolved rapidly. The biological sites weren't trying to break free, but they were definitely active. Sensors detected complex chemical processes, electromagnetic signatures that suggested communication, even what might have been music. Harmonics that followed mathematical patterns too complex to be random. Chen made the breakthrough. They're not just communicating with each other. They're trying to communicate with us. Look at this. She showed them a pattern that had emerged across all the biological sites, a repeated sequence that, when converted to binary and then to ASCII, spelled out a single word. Ready. Ready for what? Morrison asked. Ryan thought he knew. Ready to help. They've been listening, learning, waiting. They know about climate change, about pandemics, about all our problems. They're offering to help. But the sites are sealed until humanity meets the conditions, Chen pointed out. Unless, Ross said slowly, the sites themselves decide we need help now. The original programming allowed for emergency overrides if humanity faced extinction-level threats. And with climate change, pandemics, potential nuclear war, Morrison trailed off. The sites might decide we need intervention whether we've earned it or not, Ryan finished. As if in response, every monitoring station lit up simultaneously. The sites weren't opening, but something was emerging from them. Not physically, but digitally. Information, formulas, designs, flowing into databases worldwide. Not everything, just enough. Designs for carbon capture devices that actually worked. Formulas for antibiotics that could defeat resistant bacteria. Blueprints for renewable energy systems that were actually renewable. They're giving us tools, Chen said in wonder. Just enough to save ourselves, but not enough to destroy ourselves. Ryan watched the data flow, thinking about the journey that had brought him here. A damaged veteran and his service dog, stumbling onto a secret that connected past and future, human and possibly inhuman, terror and hope. What happens now? He asked Ross. Now we guide. We watch. We make sure these gifts are used wisely. The sites are still sealed, still waiting for humanity to truly earn full access. But they're not passive anymore. They're partners. Teachers, maybe. Shadow barked, drawing their attention to the window. Outside in the forest, lights were visible. Soft, blue-green, beautiful. Bioluminescence from organisms that shouldn't exist, emerging from the ground around Site 17. They're beautiful, Chen breathed. And beneficial, Ross added, checking his instruments. They're breaking down toxins in the soil, fixing decades of pollution. Ryan understood then. The sites, the network, the decades of secrecy, it had all been leading to this. Not humanity conquering advanced technology, but entering into partnership with it. Not seizing power, but earning wisdom. We're going to need more watchmen, he told Morrison. People to monitor the sites, guide the integration, ensure the balance. I know some veterans who might be interested, Morrison replied. People like you, broken but not beaten, looking for purpose. Ryan nodded, his hand on Shadow's head. The dog had started all this, following instincts that led to revolution, but not the violent kind. An evolution, slow and careful, and exactly what humanity needed. 1 year later, Ryan stood before a group of new recruits, all veterans, all with service dogs. The Watchmen, they called themselves, guardians of sites that were slowly transforming the world. You're not here to fight, he told them. You're here to protect, to guide, to ensure that humanity's greatest gifts don't become its greatest curses. Your dogs will show you things you can't see, lead you places you wouldn't think to look. Trust them. They understand things we're only beginning to grasp. Shadow, now wearing a vest that marked him as the alpha of the pack, moved among the new dogs, greeting each one. They all had the same quality he did, that unusual intelligence, that ability to sense what others couldn't. Chen had discovered that the dogs weren't randomly selected. The sites had been influencing breeding programs for decades, creating animals that could interface with the technology, bridge the gap between human and other. The dogs were as much a part of the plan as the towers and sites. The forest will test you, Ryan continued. The sites will challenge everything you think you know. But if you listen, if you're willing to learn, you'll become part of something extraordinary. After the briefing, Ryan and Shadow walked to their favorite overlook, where they could see Mount Rainier in the distance. The mountain looked different now, cleaner somehow. The organisms from the sites were spreading, slowly, carefully, healing decades of damage. His phone buzzed. Chen with an update. Ryan, something new. Site 7 is requesting direct communication. Requesting? It's displaying a message. We would like to talk to the one who chose wisdom over power. Ryan looked at Shadow, who was already standing ready for another adventure. On our way, he told Chen. As they drove towards Site 7, Ryan thought about the tower that had started it all, now rubble in the forest. But its destruction had led to something better. Not the hoarding of secrets, but their careful revelation. Not the seizing of power, but the earning of partnership. The road ahead was uncertain. Humanity might still fail the tests, might prove unworthy of the gifts being offered. But for the first time since his injury, since the war, since everything fell apart, Ryan had hope. Shadow barked, his tail wagging, sensing his human's optimism. The future was coming, ready or not. But with the Watchmen standing guard, with the sites as teachers rather than treasures, humanity might just survive its adolescence and grow into something worthy of the stars. The forest held its secrets still, but now those secrets had guardians who understood that sometimes the greatest strength was knowing when not to use power, the greatest wisdom was knowing when to wait, and the greatest courage was choosing partnership over dominion. Site 7 waited ahead, with questions that would need answers and challenges that would need courage. But Ryan had Shadow, had purpose, had hope. It was enough. It was everything. If this incredible story has changed how you see the hidden places in our world, if you believe there are secrets in our forests worth protecting rather than exploiting, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Share this story with others who need to know that sometimes our dogs see what we cannot, that broken veterans can become humanity's greatest guardians, and that the most powerful choice is often to wait for wisdom rather than seize power. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey into the forests that hide our future. And remember, the next time your dog leads you off the trail, follow. You never know what secrets they might reveal.